Of Rockstar's two monstrous franchises, in my opinion, 2010's Red Dead Redemption was the most defined and focused of the two. Thanks to a solid, if minimal, port from UK-based developer Double 11, the PlayStation 4, the Pro, the Switch and even PS5 players can now enjoy this magnificent game for the first time with enhancements. Now, although the NPCs may be spinning around with glee, it may not have the same effect on you. As soon as the announcement trailer came, I could not help but feel this was a wasted opportunity for Take-Two to deliver a reimagining of this still groundbreaking game. As such, the only way to review this from a technical perspective is to caveat the two main audiences it is for. For those that have played this on PS3, 360, then you're not really missing out on a great deal extra here, both in content and presentation. Multiplayer is no longer present, but Undead Nightmare DLC is. For new players on PS4 or Switch, this will then fall into a solid but largely frills-free port, with Switch players getting the most out of their systems. PS4 is not far from Switch, both hit a 1080p resolution that is fixed, and Switch uses an FXAA full screen pass to clean up those jaggers a little. Now, whereas PlayStation 4 offers a choice of FXAA a la the Switch, or the far superior anti-aliasing solution of AMD's FSR2. Now, I'm not convinced though that this is not actually a super sampled image above a 1080p base for a couple of reasons. Now, I'd caveat this with it may not be, but it reinforces why I say pixel counts are not a full view into image quality. Now, due to the jittered pixel samples that this AA uses, its temporal buffers, and along with the possible super sampling render, the same 1080p shot resolves significantly more detail in thin and subpixel elements such as shrubs, trees, shadows and even textures on PlayStation 4. Which is welcome alongside the drastic increase in image stability both in motion and in those high frequency details. It really elevates the IQ over the Switch, and even though they are both a 1080p resolve, comparisons to the 4K Pro version stand up well for the base console. The bigger console does have more detail and sharpness present in all areas, but image stability is only slightly better, with the comparisons showing a much smaller visual delta than a straight 1080 versus 4K would normally represent, something backed up with the One X backwards compatibility version also at 4K. Textures and details are sharper than the PS4, but stability is worse due to the lack of any motion vectors. They both lose out to the Pro though, which I believe also super samples above that 2160p output, with shadows being the single biggest boost over all of them, and a sharper, more stable image over that 4K Xbox One X backwards compatibility version you see here. I will also cover more on the impact the FSR2 mode adds in the performance section later. Now, FSR2 does have a couple of negatives though. Shadow stability and artifacting from those temporal samples can be quite bad. Distant objects can shimmer and become more unstable than the FXAA pass, Switch and even PS3 version on occasion, but this is largely down to shadows, with those dithered samples causing breakup and ghosting in the shadow maps over the older version and the FXAA sampled mode. Shadow maps are a big boost here though, with the cascade and clarity scaling up with resolutions over all previous versions, and that includes the Switch, with a far wider cascade used, higher resolution and better filtering applied. Again, it's minor, it does show up in my side-by-side comparisons, and it is here that the first dilemma presents itself, with FSR2 2.2 here being much better for all areas aside shadows, where FXAA can often present more stable and artifact-free shadow maps. When it comes to the Pro or the backwards compatibility PS5, then I definitely recommend this mode, as that 4K or even increased 4K resolution resolves most of the issues here. You still get some artifacting, but resolution and shadow maps are far higher. The PS5 in its BC mode just runs the exact same code as that Pro, 2160p, with the choice of FXAA or FSR2. Both look incredibly sharp, but FSR2 is the most stable and cleanest. Compared to PS3, Even the Switch looked significantly better over that console's 1152 by 648 base resolution, which is then treated with a full-screen Quincux AA pass that softens everything to reduce shimmering at the cost of clarity. In addition, the ports are based on the superior Xbox 360 version, with the PS3 having some minor reductions in grass, level of detail, textures and effects. And as such, this represents the worst version you could still be playing, and in that sense all three versions here do offer varying degrees of improvements on that. Sadly, performance is not that drastic. Well, most of the time anyway.
Folks say it was built during the Mexican War. What kinds of soldiers around back then?
Why'd they leave?
Well, I ain't entirely sure. I heard they had to go up north to fight Indians, or maybe they got tired of being soldiers and went looking for gold.
The sound is practically identical to the originals. Both mix, bass and delivery is identical. Aside any AV operating system choices, speaker setup changes you have, this is the same, albeit again high production quality soundtrack down to each gunshot, horse hoof or well delivered voice acting. It's not a surprise, but with the relatively minor visual updates this title offers, a remixed or more score would be far beyond the scope of this port. Wrapping up the visuals though, the Switch does have a few minor cuts to get to that 1080p docked level and 720p in handheld mode. The cheaper FXAA is 1, LOD slightly reduced, mostly on grass alpha, and shadows all point to the Achilles heel of the Nintendo console of bandwidth and fill rate, something noted in performance also. Now it is far superior than the PS3 version, however, not relative to that 10 plus year gap and the fact the Switch's GPU is, on paper at least, almost exactly 2 times more powerful than the PlayStation 3, with almost 2 times the resolution in docked mode, effectively a 177% increase in resolution output over that PS3 base, offers a visible IQ bump and far more solid performance. Aside this though, it's not a standout on the Switch relative to its own specs and other recent ports, such as The Witcher 3, and in handheld 720p mode, it still looks good relative to the small screen, but this is still a 13-year-old game, just with a new frock. Now, performance is the one area I would have hoped more could have been done, specifically for the PlayStation 4 and Pro, let alone the PS5 in BC mode. The same 30 FPS cap is present, and again largely points to animation and logic issues and the budget allocation and scope of this port. And using the PS3 version, just the opening sections alone can have it hit the low 20s often, and in heavier battles this can easily hit the low teens. The 360 version was slightly better but ran with adaptive VSync, so it had tearing. In that sense, the Switch offers at times a 30+% increase in frame rates and much more consistent levels of performance. However, it itself does dip in some denser areas of combat, alpha, geometry, both in single player and that Undead Nightmare DLC. It's never terrible, but I could get into the mid-20s at worst, and something that happened in the base Xbox One backwards compatibility version also when that launched, and it's true of both the 360 and PS3 versions. They're just far worse. The fact the Switch has VSync engaged is welcome, and in most playtime it is a locked 30 FPS, but do expect some dense areas, big combat sections and NPC routines to cause a few periods of stutter throughout your high plains drifter adventure, and this will be worse the older your Switch is. Unsurprisingly, both the PS4 and Pro are rock solid at 30 FPS, with all the tested sections that can cause stutter on the Switch never once occurring here. Some of those though, such as the cutscenes, are likely memory bound on the Switch, so this makes sense. But even using the possible super sampled FSR2 mode on both, they remain locked. Now, I had one stutter after looting a corpse, which is likely just context on the PlayStation 4 itself. That was it. The improved FSR2 mode does appear to add more weight on the GPU but doesn't affect performance. However, there are other signs it's putting more pressure on the machines. The fans on my PS4 and more so my Pro can ramp up to maximum when jumping between the two modes in the same scene, such as this dense view during zombie battles. Using FXAA, this leaves my Pro silent as the grave. But once FSR2 is engaged, the fans ramp up to maximum and will remain that way until the scene quietens down with less overdraw, or I change it back. The game has an impressive level of detail for such an old game, and the 4K resolution really helps you appreciate this, and it actually boosts it up because it seems to scale with resolution. A lot of level of detail in games do. And it signifies again the excellent and exceptional work from Rockstar to really push the boat out when they ship this game back on that generation. But the tiny pixels and triangles can be very impactful on GPU performance, and 4K is demanding enough, but a potential higher pixel count than that on the Pro and the PS5 would explain this shift in console thermals during these clear, fill rate and bandwidth heavier moments. We have to address one key area though, and that is the backwards compatibility elephant in the room. Xbox offered a huge uplift to this very game for free a few years ago on the Xbox One and One X, and you can still play this now on the Series S and the Series X at 1440p or 4K respectively, and fundamentally there's not a drastic difference between the two. Yes, you do get a sharper, cleaner image, far more stable, and shadows are significantly improved, which adds a lot of depth to the scene, which is the most poignant thing you'll notice between the two. But overall, in general play, you're likely to just think that they're the same game running on the same console, because realistically, this is just a port of that original Xbox 360 base, and you can see all the same trapments in NPC AI issues, and even the memory allocations where you can flip the camera back and forth, and NPCs will just spawn into view right in front of you. Now, Red Dead 2 provides a glimmer of the potential lost. Using the engine and base, we could have seen a remaster along the lines of Dead Space or The Last of Us Part 1. The leap here already feels a world apart from this up-res version. From the stunning PBR materials, per pixel lighting, fuller world detail, animal simulation, weather simulation, and overall world building could, nay should, have been even better than these examples show. And for this reason, I simply cannot recommend this game to anyone who owns or has played the last generation versions. It seems this was a Switch port from day one. The console could have never delivered anything close to this quality, and the PS4 was added to the mix as a backwards compatibility filler, evident by no Xbox version being present. And if you own an Xbox One, even upwards from this, you can pick up the game for a few bucks and get 90% of the quality here for 10% of the price. That's mind-blowing. Now don't misunderstand me, this is a solid old school port, and Double 11 have delivered on the requirements and scope. The lack of 60 FPS is the biggest omission here, all reasons aside. The Switch may have struggled, but PS4 up most certainly would not. For the $50 entry fee, that hits the hardest. The main reason this 13-year-old game still impresses as much as it does is due to Rockstar's passion and attention to detail. From confident and strong artistic direction, technical prowess, intelligent choices throughout, and a physics-centric and data-driven engine, the game scales well with resolution, enabling you to appreciate the masterful craftsmanship even more. But it is dated in many areas. Textures, lighting, atmospherics, and world realism are the biggest. As fun as it is, the feeling of a missed opportunity overwhelms you. Take-Two should have bumped up the budget and scope for a reimagining of this majestic title. It deserved more than this, and the continued re-release of Rockstar games marches on. And as GTA 5 is never out of the top 10 sellers each year, it can be hard to argue against their reasoning and certainly economics. But maybe one day this slice of the armadillo will become the entire watermelon. That's it for another deep dive into game technology, pixels, performance and all things computer related. If you like what we do here on IGN, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you at high noon.